Well, good morning again. It is Resurrection Sunday, ladies and gents. As I speak at this very moment, there are literal millions of people around this country and they're all possibly asking the question, what is the big deal about this last part? You know, I don't know if some of you were ever cynical. I was kind of started life out just a little bit cynical. Just a little bit skeptical. And so I did a little of this church bit when I was younger, and this is the part that started to kind of annoy me a little bit, because it seemed like Jesus came and said all these really great things. Some of them were nice, some of them were a little bit confrontational, and it seems like we save it all up for the end where he dies and then comes back. It comes back, and it seems like that's the most important thing. And that was hard for me to get around, because I didn't see why is that the thing? I mean, couldn't you still believe in Jesus, maybe, and just not have that part? Because it's a little bit difficult to just buy that. Can I just be honest? It's maybe just a little bit tough of a sell for some people. It was for me. And so a lot of times I would hear friends talk, about this in church and to their parents and stuff, and they would ask, did that really happen? Come on, like give me the real scoop. Do you really think that this happened? And often I would hear answers that kind of disappointed me. They weren't really what I was looking for. They'd say things like, well, you could just kind of take the life lessons and still apply them, right? Maybe you've heard that one before. Or, well, it's just what we believe because we're Christians. Why do we do it? Because we're Christians. This is what Christians believe. Now, maybe you never had that thought. Maybe you always were all in. Maybe you never even gave it another second thought. Maybe you never gave it a first thought. This is the first time anybody's ever really confronted you with this idea before. But I've got to tell you, as cynical as a person I was, the more that I have studied, the more that I have learned what's actually in those accounts, what they mean, learned about history, learned about the people that were actually historically involved, the more I am convinced that this is the most crucial dilemma in all of history and in every single person's life sitting here. The resurrection. We've been looking at the very real people that Jesus chose as part of his mission. And the good news is, if you have not been able to relate to any of the people that we've been talking about so far, you may just be able to relate to Mary for whatever reason. And I'll just talk to you about Mary. This is Mary from Magdala. They call her Mary the Magdalene. Mary actually has some outward advantages that many people would be envious of. At the same time, believe it or not, with the advantages that she has terrible, tormenting inward struggles. Now, maybe you didn't think that was possible for a person to have outward advantages and still be struggling terribly on the inside, but we learned that that is exactly what was going on with Mary. And when we see first Mary and Luke, this is Luke's account, chapter 8, verse 1, Luke writes that Jesus traveled from one town and village to another, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom of God. The 12 were with him, and also some women who had been cured of evil spirits and diseases. Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 evil spirits had come out, Joanna, the wife of Chuza, the manager of Herod's household, Susanna, and many others. These women were helping to support them out of their own means. And so here we have this lady, one of a small group of ladies, who, this is impressive actually, she in those days had managed to accumulate somehow or another enough resources that when this opportunity to just travel around and basically see what this guy is doing and support them came up, she could do it. She's not just taking care of herself. Apparently, she has so much resource available to her that she can sponsor this little troop of 12 men as they go from place to place to place for years on end. She's part of it. And you might think, wow, well, she's rich. Mary had some money. That doesn't fix everything, does it? If you think, I'm going to kind of paraphrase Mike Tyson, anybody that thinks that having a whole lot of money is going to cure all their problems ain't never had a whole lot of money before. It does not cure all of your struggles. In fact, sometimes it amplifies your struggles. And I don't exactly know how Mary ended up in the position that she was in, but it's notable that they said Jesus had cured her of 7 evil spirits. And whatever you think about evil spirits, whatever you can imagine, I'm telling you, 1 would be a lot, 7 would be like a lot. That 7 would be like all that you can imagine. Whatever you picture, if you picture somebody being suicidal and causing harm to themselves and being in and out of reality here and there as they go, or maybe they're harming others, or they have this insatiable anger and they get physically violent and they stay that way. Whatever you can imagine, it was all of it and then some. And what we know from this passage is that when Jesus met up with her, he had compassion on her and delivered all of those things in an instant. She was free. All that stuff just disappeared. She was in control of herself. Again, she was herself once more. She could think with some clarity. She could see what was happening again. That's a big deal. It's beyond a big deal. This is one tormented person who met up with Jesus, and it changed in a moment. I don't know where you are in that. I don't know if you have the faith to believe that that could have been true. But that is the account of Mary's life. And the thing about this account is it becomes more and more believable, even as things become more and more unbelievable. See, Mary, as she saw Jesus minister, saw a lot of things that most of us would almost die to see for ourselves for real. There were the miracles. I don't know if you heard about the miracles, but there were miracles involved. People who'd been set free in much the same way she had been set free. People that were given a second chance to live. Like really live. Literally. She saw miracles of provision. Not just, wow, I'm not sure how we're going to put it together tomorrow. Maybe we'll find a little side job or do a little hustle or something in the meantime and make a few extra bucks. Just impossible miracles of provision. And if all he'd done were miracles, that would be the most memorable experience of any of our lives, and certainly of hers. But the thing about Jesus is, he didn't just do miracles. He always did miracles, but there was something that would come along for the ride. There was some bit of truth, some new understanding of things that would come with that, because he wasn't just there, he said, to do miracles, to do signs and wonders, but he was there to open people's eyes to the truth and to save people from judgment. And there are so many examples, but one of the most flooring things that Jesus did was he walked around and spoke and carried this authority that no one else could claim. He claimed to have the authority to forgive sins. Who could be that arrogant? Who could claim that? Who would try to claim that? He claimed the authority to forgive sins. He claimed the authority to tell people that now you are forgiven, you can just walk around in your life with peace. He could show incredible grace and very blunt confrontation all in the same sentence, because he claimed and walked with the authority to forgive. But it was more than that. It was more than that. You see, the Jews had been taught from the beginning. They had been involved in God's mission to the earth to bring people back from their sinful state to himself again, to become part of his kingdom. And so they had been told and told and told through prophecy after prophecy after prophecy that was often backed up with miracles, by the way, and that there would be a one, not just any king, but that one day there would be one king, the ultimate king, the king of all kings, who God would send to be on the earth, to walk around and be with people, and to initiate the one and only true kingdom over all the earth for all time. And Mary, on the ground, saw how careful Jesus was, at least in the beginning, not to bring that to light in front of the wrong people, because it was too early, because there was risk in that. And Jesus had an understanding of what had to happen, what would happen shortly in the future, but it wasn't the time for that yet. And so his ministry went on, and it went on, but slowly and more surely, more and more people, select few, would hear him answer their questions, more and more of them, more and more of them. To the woman at the well, some of you know so well, who was talking about the Messiah. To a crowd of onlookers questioning him about who he really was. Come on, just come out and say it. Are you the guy? To his closest men, his disciples. Make no mistake. I am the guy. I am the guy. And there isn't any other guy coming. There's only one, and it's me. And it's me. But there was even more about Jesus. It was just wild. People talked about sin a lot back then. They did. Especially as Jews. They talked about it. They had a whole sacrifice system. They had a temple set up. You know, when you did something naughty, there was a certain prescription for that. You know, you need to go and repent and take something with you, and the something would often die, and the death would symbolize and remind us that the penalty of sin is death. Maybe not now, but there's a time when we have to become reconciled with our Father if we're living in sin, and we all live in sin. And so they had this whole system set up for that. But very few, actually hardly anybody, claimed to truly understand what was coming on the other side of that last breath. And Jesus not only claimed to know about it, he guaranteed what would come to pass when we draw our last breath. And that he alone would have the authority to decide who is going where. And that was amazing. For someone like Mary, for someone like yourself, if you have anything in common with Mary, if you've ever gone through terrible inward struggles while on the outside certain things seem to be fine, you know what it's like to see very little compassion. You know, when you have some advantages, but you're struggling on the inside, isn't that something? The sympathy is very small. It's like living on an island, actually. In fact, the more advantages that people perceive that you have, the less and the less and the less compassion people have for you in all of your loneliness, in all of your poor decisions, in all of your bad relationships, in all of your addictions, in all of your self-harm, or whatever it might be. The less and the less and the less it is. But here stands Jesus saying, I have compassion for you because I know you to the bone. I know you to the core. I understand your predicament. I'm here to say, I am the way out of your predicament. All of that would have been amazing if you believed it. But there was something hard about Jesus. Jesus didn't always say things in a way that, you or I could pick up and make sense. And one thing that he said that troubled people every single time they heard it, every single time, were things like this: the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and teachers of the law, and he must be killed, and on the third day be raised to life. He gave them this warning over and over and over again. And by the time that we read to the end of the gospel accounts, it is clear nobody had any idea what he really meant by that. Or if they did, they refused to buy into it because they could not wrap their minds around how could that be? How could God send his chosen one, the son of his own self, the very perfect image of himself, and have him be here and then let him be killed? How could that make any sense? He said it over and over. I think they hoped that it was some sort of spiritual metaphor. I mean, he used metaphors all the time anyway. It was not always very clear. You had to be hungry for it to go after it. You had to ask him sometimes, as hungry as you might be, what did you mean by this? But it wasn't a metaphor. It happened just like he said. I mean, from the beginning, he was never trusted by any of those people. They were skeptical. They were cynical. And in the end, we're told they were envious. Envy was the root. But no matter the cause, one night he was arrested, marched to a kangaroo court of sorts in the front yard of a religious leader, found guilty of blasphemy. He would not deny that he was the one. And he confirmed it. And so he was marched to actually a couple of places and finally arrives in front of the governor of that district, the Roman chosen governor of Judea, Pontius Pilate, very famous man now. And Pontius wants nothing to do with it. Pontius only sees political trouble. And actually, he's unnerved to the bone because his wife has had a dream saying, this man is innocent, don't do this. And he doesn't know what to make of that. And so he tries everything he can to eke out of the responsibility of making the call on this situation. And all of his choices seem bad. He can give them what they want, but he knows he's killing an innocent man. He's seen this stuff before. He's in politics. He understands how things work. Or he can sacrifice him. Maybe save some lives. Maybe save his neck. Save peace in the region. So he, in the end, is too afraid to make the call himself, to own the responsibility. He opts out and says, here, it's on your hands. Do what you want. Crucify him. And so they march him through town naked, after flogging him, after beating the skin off of his body with 39 blows of the cattails, and naked and carrying his own executioner through town until he couldn't literally carry it one more step, and someone was called in to carry it for him, and they brought him up to the top of this little overlook where everyone in town would pass by frequently and see the shame of this terrible criminal. In case you're ever thinking about raising some little rebellion of your own, take a look at what happened to this guy. And so they nail him to that cross, and they hang him by his hands till he suffocates to death. And they spear him through just in case. And in Mark it's written that Mary was there watching the whole thing. See it in Mark 15. His last breath was marked with an earthquake and a whole lot of confusion and a whole lot of yelling and carrying on. No one knew what was going on. They broke the legs of the other two just to hurry the process up and get out of there. The body was brought down and buried by one of the very few leaders who actually had believed in him, Joseph. And they take him to a tomb, a brand new one, cut into solid rock. Lay him in there. It's covered with a boulder. The boulder's covered with a wax seal with a governor's stamp. Don't mess with this at the price of your life. This is the Roman seal. A 16-man guard was posted. You know, if you fall asleep on guard, they burn you to death with your own clothes. True story. And it's written that Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where he was laid. Can you imagine? What's not written are all the things that would be going through your mind if you were Mary. Can you even try to imagine? Try if you can for imagine. Just imagine for a moment. Try. If this was the king, if he really was the king, and I mean, it looked like he had to be, who could do the things that he did over and over and over? If there ever was God's favor on somebody, God's power in somebody, this was the somebody. There couldn't be any more. But how could that be? If this is really God's plan, could God not see that a bunch of religious politicians in disguise would put an end to this whole thing? How could he not see? How could this be God after all? Mary saw it happen. You didn't. Just imagine for yourselves all the things that would be going through your minds. If you've ever wrestled with doubts about his existence, whether any of it happened, could it be real? I mean, imagine for yourself then and there watching that boulder go closed over the hole one final time. If this guy is now dead, he may have been a God-fearing man. He may have been very good. He may have had God's favor on his life, like many people have had God's favor on their life in the past. He may have been used by God to say good and true things. He may be just like many other God-fearing men. The Bible is full of God-fearing men who God selected out and chose and gave things to do. But the thing about all of those God-fearing men is that they were not perfect. And if this is like any other God-fearing man, then everything about this man is all called into question. Because the truth is, good men do sometimes get carried away. Don't they? Decent men do sometimes get it wrong. In spite of all the good that they offer the world. Good men, this Old Testament is so full of good men, decent men. God used them to do things, do miracles, but often enough they stepped over boundaries they were not meant to, and that is much part of the story. Just as much a part of the story as all of the good things. If this man was just a man, then everything that Jesus had spoken to Mary, about Mary, and on Mary's behalf, all of a sudden is just up in the air. All the authority that he seemed to have may have been real. It may have been temporary too. If all this command that Jesus gave, it just may be more of a recommendation. It may be a suggestion for a more positive existence on this earth. He maybe should have just written some books, some self-help stuff that you could pick up at the bookstore or on Amazon or on Kindle or whatever. made a little bit of extra money. Maybe he should have just been quiet. Every explanation that Jesus gave about the meaning of the Scriptures, the true, least understood meaning of the Scriptures, could just be maybe an interpretation. It could maybe be up for debate. As long as he's dead, he may be decent, but he's just a man. And imagine what it would be to be Mary and question all those things. Whole day goes by uninterrupted. We're told that they obeyed the Sabbath. It was Saturday. They stayed home. They didn't do anything with the body. They didn't prepare anything. Everybody stayed home out of obedience to the Sabbath. And everything went quiet. Till Sunday morning, very early in the morning, Luke wrote, the women took the spices they had prepared and went to the tomb. I don't know what Mary was thinking, but I know she was bringing spices and perfume, not breakfast. I also know that when they got there, first thing, Mary sees an unsealed tomb with no guards, not just less guards, no guards, and just barely brings herself to get close enough to see for sure it's open, and then goes running off. She freaks out. She runs back to the boys. And she doesn't say, oh, thank God, it's over. She says, they've taken him out of the tomb and we don't know where they've put him. And if nothing else had happened, that would be the end. That would be the most depressing, flooring event of a person's life. After coming through all that, after going through all the torment for years inwardly, and then coming back to life, and having peace, and having confidence, whatever happens in this life doesn't truly matter as long as I know I'm with my Lord, as long as I'm with my Savior, it's all good. As bad as it may be, as grievous as it may be, as many tears as I may shed in this lifetime, as long as I know I'm with Him, I'm okay. And then He dies. I mean, was it all a hoax? Was it just some religious placebo? You know, had a little spiritual experience like Oprah would talk about. Remember Oprah? Having a spiritual experience. Was it that? Heard a really great song on the radio, changed my life. It might have been. But the most disputed thing happens next. She comes back to see again. The boys, Peter and John, come racing down, come racing back, and she goes with them. She catches up. And they run off. They don't say a lot to her. They don't say anything, actually. They run off. But here she is, and John wrote that she stood outside the tomb crying. And as she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb. And somebody asks her a question. Two somebodies. First one in front. Some dudes in there. Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you're looking for? Looking for my Lord. She's a mess. She barely eke out what she's there for. And then again, from behind comes a question from somebody. Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for? At first she thinks he's the gardener. The gardener. Maybe it's not the gardener. Maybe it's some passerby. Maybe somebody who feels something for somebody staring into a tomb, crying their eyes out. Perhaps it's a couple of guards who are freaked out about the fact that they abandoned post. Maybe there's some hope beyond all hopes that they could stand here and act like they were here the whole time and can't believe all of those lame guys who ran off crying because of an earthquake and a few rowdy angel-looking dudes. Who is it you're looking for? And it's Jesus. It's Jesus. That guy has some kind of a sense of humor. I love that line more than any other line in the Bible. Who is it you're looking for? Who is it? It is the question that demands an answer. If everything that happened up to this point is just muted, the guy dies and it's over. You can take it or leave it. You can do what you want with that. But if this guy dies and then walks back, you have to answer the question. You have to answer the question. It deserves an answer. It demands an answer. The things that he said, the commands that he gave, the forgiveness that he said he was equipped alone to offer, it demands an answer. Who is it? Who is it? Is it Jesus, the Lord of Lords, or the gardener? Is it Jesus, the ultimate authority over sin and death and life and judgment? Or is it some passerby? Is it some lame guard? Or is it God's one and only Son, whom would ever be sent? Who is it? It demands an answer. It demands an answer from all of us. Of course, I can never force anybody. I can never persuade anybody to pick one or the other. All I can do is lay all the cards on the table as I can and show you and walk you through the story, which begs the question, if you don't believe, have you decided or have you just postponed it? Because the evidence demands the verdict. And so what I'm calling you to do today, whether you're a Christian or not a Christian, or maybe you're somewhere in between, you don't even know what defines a Christian versus not a Christian. Maybe it's kind of hazy in there. I totally understand that. But what I'm calling you today to do is to remind yourself and to pursue this question. As a Christian, you need to pursue this question daily. Is it the Lord of Lords or is it the gardener? Because the truth is, you will be doubted, you will be called on to doubt time and time and time again. You will question whether He really has given you any power to do anything at all. Am I really been set free from anything, truly? Am I really guaranteed anything? Do I really have peace? You will have to come back to this question. Is it the gardener that gives me peace, or is it Jesus, the Lord of all lords? If you're concerned, if you're not sure, I would just beg of you, question more. Raise the issue. Don't take my word for it. Go after it. Chase it, because it demands an answer. Is it a passerby, or is it the Lord of all lords? Deserves an answer. If you just plain, straight up don't believe, I understand. There's not a word that I could say in this moment that's going to convince you otherwise, and I'm not going to try to do that because I'm smarter than that. Let me say, this guy's not very smart. Well, I'm smarter than that. I'm being true. I'm at least that smart. I know what it is to be cynical. I know what it is to be skeptical. You have a brain, you have a mind. You think things through. You don't just buy stuff because some guy on a stage you've never met before says to. I'm just calling on you to consider whether or not it actually happened. And forget all of the stuff that people get caught up in, Well, did God, what about the dinosaurs? And what about this? Is this actually a sin or not a sin? I want to hear about that. I'm going to be honest with you. I actually think you're avoiding and spending a lot of time where you don't even need to. Because if the question is he the Lord or not, everything else will fall into place after you answer that question. If he's the Lord, he's the Lord. And he will work with you, and he will walk you through all the little details and all the things. What's right? What's really wrong? What's truth? What's a lie? That will come in time. But the central question of your life is not what happened with the dinosaurs. It's what happened on this day that these ladies and then all these men came to see this guy, and then he shows up and shows himself to hundreds of people, and then stuff starts happening, and people come out of hiding, and all of a sudden people aren't afraid of dying anymore, and they're brave and they're bold. What happened? What happened? How did this little band of 12 people walk through the persecution of centuries of Roman persecution and in abiding places and other little countries? How did they walk through everything that was meant to stamp this little rebellion out? How did that happen? How did Christianity survive thousands of years of bad leadership? And how did it survive the snuffing out of all of the historical texts and the attempts to get rid of and find people and put them in jail for even possessing some of these letters? How did it make it to here if it wasn't true? I'm just going to share this one little thing I saw on social media, of all places. I couldn't believe it. Found something good. It was this guy commenting on Watergate. Did you see it? Raise your hand if you saw it. The guy you didn't? Oh, this is good. This guy's commenting on Watergate, and he says, you know what convinced me that the resurrection was real? Watergate. And this is what he says. He says, here's the truth. Here's the thing. 12 of the most powerful men in the country, in the most powerful country at the time, couldn't keep the same lie straight for 3 weeks. Had more vested interest than anybody else in keeping this lie, and they couldn't keep it for 3 weeks. You're telling me that 12 guys kept a lie for 40 years? Something to think about. This morning, I will pray for you at the end, but this morning I have something exciting to do. I have somebody that wants to be baptized. And baptize him we shall. Josh, come on up front, buddy. Josh is about to do what people did in Jesus' day when they were about to go all in, completely immerse themselves around a body of teaching. And this body of teaching, of course, is Jesus' teaching. That's what we're here to celebrate today. That's what we're here about. And Josh is just making the ultimate public commitment, stepping over the threshold publicly to make it official. I am pursuing Jesus as my Lord, and I just want to give him a minute to say a word or two.
Hello again, I'm Joshua. I've been baptized before. This will be the third time. The first time I was baptized, I was a child. I thought I was going swimming. Didn't know why. I got baptized again in 2017. I knew why I was doing it, and I didn't go swimming. This time I'm getting baptized Because the last time I've gotten baptized, I didn't know what was coming afterwards. I am getting baptized this time. I'm not going swimming. I know why I'm doing it. And I know what's coming afterwards. I'm suiting up. I'm getting the body armor of God on.
Amen, buddy. Okay.